The Genius of Islam also received the top award for non-fiction from the Middle East Outreach Council. The Genius of Islam was published in Arabic in April 2012 by Dar Al-Ilm Lilmalayin in Beirut. So Bryn is a very gifted writer and a knowledgeable person, and as a matter of fact, I suggested to him to become an ambassador or a minister. He said he will think about that. So this is the book that was translated in Arabic. For those of you who are learning Arabic, you may need to have a look at it. So he will share his knowledge with us about the Genius of Islam. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Bryn Barnard.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming this evening, and especially for my pals from AIS coming. I had the good fortune when I was in high school to be an exchange student to Malaysia. I lived with a Muslim family in a small village not far from Singapore, living in a house on stilts with a thatched roof, and a very devout Muslim family who were extremely kind to me and really any questions I had about their faith, they answered. And it got me very interested in Islamic religion and the civilization. And when I was in university, whenever there was an opportunity to learn about Southeast Asia and Islam, I took it. I ultimately was able to teach an art history class on Islamic art. But my career has been as an illustrator, and more recently as a writer and illustrator. And I've written books on diseases and on plagues. I've illustrated books on dinosaurs and on space travel. But after 9/11, I put together a slideshow that I showed in my school district in Washington State. I went around to the elementary school, the middle school, the high school, and our community college to talk about that experience that I'd had in Malaysia and what the Muslims that I knew in Southeast Asia were like. And out of that slideshow ultimately came this book that I proposed to Random House, my publisher, and they contacted librarians in the US, said, what do you think of a book for middle school kids about Islamic civilization and its impact on the West? That was my proposal. And librarians enthusiastically answered, saying, there's nothing like this that we know of in our libraries. And it really fill a hole in the curriculum. And if you look at a middle school curriculum in the United States, so typically people that are in 7th and 8th grade, typically there might be one page or two or three devoted to the Islamic world, and often when it says something like this, it says, after the fall of Rome, the classical Greek and Roman knowledge was preserved by the Arabs for 1,000 years, handed back to the Europeans, and that's the end of the story. And they may, after maybe saying a little bit about the 5 pillars and so on and so forth, it's very limited in talk, and it almost sounds like Islam is something that existed once upon a time and isn't around anymore. And so I wanted to show how the story about the Islamic world and the Western world is a continuing interwoven one. And that's really what this book is about. It's not so much about the religion of Islam, but the civilization and the undeniable fact that there's this continuing connection that up until a couple hundred years ago was understood and acknowledged throughout the West. Europeans in the 12th and 13th and 14th centuries often talked about their debt to Arab knowledge for their understanding of the world. For Islam's first 500 years, it was the preeminent scientific power in the world, rivaled pretty much only by China. Even long after sort of the tables turned and Europe sort of got back on its feet after the Middle Ages and started becoming more powerful, there was still this connection continued. So what my book does is talk about connections in science and art and philosophy and technology and architecture. And I'm going to go through that now, and I'm going to try and briefly give you sort of a timeline to sort of, for some of you this will be stuff you already know, for others this may be new information, and then I will sort of talk about different areas And this is only meant to be an introduction. It's not meant to be comprehensive. If you're interested, my book is for sale at Jarir Bookstore in both the English and the Arabic editions. And there's a very extensive bibliography in the back. You can also order it off of my website from Amazon.com, and with connections there. And so this gives you lots of places to go if you become more interested in the subject. So it's called The Genius of Islam, and the subtitle is How Muslims Made the Modern World. I'm not suggesting that Muslims were the only people that made the modern world, but I think that too often Islamic accomplishments and contributions haven't gotten enough acknowledgement. And so, and as I indicated, I'm an illustrator, and so every painting and map that you've seen here I did myself. All the paintings are in oil, and all the maps were done in Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop. And of course I wrote the book as well, but a book is a cooperative enterprise between an author and an editor, and in my case also an art director and a designer. And so all four of us working together created what you're seeing here. And so this timeline that I'm going to go through kind of quickly shows you the influences that Islam had and the world had in Islam. So before the advent of Islam in the 7th century, you have classical Egypt. Let's see, I guess I can use this. Classical Egypt. Can everybody hear me, by the way? Okay. Classical Egypt, the founding of Rome in 763. Classical Greece, the birth of Jesus. Islam, of course, being an Abrahamic religion with connections to Judaism and Christianity. Sassanid Persia is really important. Classical India, and all these things you'll be hearing as I'm talking. I'll be referring back to this. This is probably the crucial date, 476, the fall of Rome. The Roman civilization was the organizing principle in the Mediterranean, provided law, provided technology, provided a sort of a philosophical organizing principle. With the fall of the Western Roman Empire, that changed. It created a political vacuum. And so with the rise of Islam from Mecca, here in Arabia, first, this is the area that became, during the life of the Prophet Muhammad, this is the area that became Islamic. This area here is during the first 4 followers, the caliphs that followed him, and then this light green area takes us to about 100 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. So the dates, of course, that all Muslims know: 570, the birth of the Prophet Muhammad. In 613, he begins preaching the message of Islam. About that same time, the Tang dynasty is rising in China. And so the connections between Chinese civilization and Islamic civilization become very important. And you'll see, I've already mentioned Persia, Rome, Greece. All of these other cultures are things that add and connect with the Islamic world. I'm going to be mentioning these 2 areas here, and if I seem like I'm running through this, the last time I gave this presentation here, I wasn't able to get to the end, and it was very frustrating for me, because the end is really one of the most important parts of the story. So you can read the book and get all the extra information. So the Umayyads in Spain, this was the first Islamic dynasty. So after the first 4 caliphs, or caliphs, first 4 rulers of Islam after the Prophet Muhammad, there was a long dynasty, the Umayyads. They were based in Damascus, Syria. And the Abbasid revolution in 764 destroyed the Umayyad dynasty, but one survivor managed to get from Damascus here in Syria and go along North Africa and arrive in the fledgling Islamic civilization, southern Spain, and found the Western Umayyad dynasty. And the competition, socially, politically, economically, technologically, between the Western Umayyads in Spain and the Abbasids in their new capital of Baghdad fueled a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today. That competition, a fashion that would start in Damascus, would be very quickly transmitted to Cordoba, the capital of the Western Umayyads.